and welcome to the Fast and the Curious with me, Betty Glover, still in Australia because I'm still covering the Euros here. So, yes, I am still down under.
I'm Christian Hugill, as usual, in my home in London, where last night I saw Girls Aloud, which, I'll be honest with you, Betty, probably meant more to me than the Formula One this weekend. And you know, I like my Formula One, but my God, did they bring it.
Was it the best night of your life?
Banger after banger after banger. I tell you what, when Something Kind of Ooh came on, that was one of the moments of my life, I can tell you.
So no Greg for this one. He's on his way to Taylor Swift, so we can absolutely let him off for that. But welcome to our debrief of the Spanish Grand Prix, which, as we record this, has literally just finished. So we're going to go through all of the on-track action, of course, and we're also doing something that we haven't done for a while. We've got a reserve driver, listener Rach, on, who was at the Grand Prix all weekend. She's still in Spain because it's literally just finished. Rach, welcome to the podcast.
Sorry.
Where are you and what are you doing?
I'm the last student. I'm just kind of walking and back up the wrong way, essentially.
I don't know how much of that we got, so let me, just in case it wasn't clear, Rach is on the final corner on the track. I think this is the first time we've ever had a listener on the track to join us in a debrief. We've had people who are there. She has got a Ferrari t-shirt on, Ferrari cap, that I think is a Ferrari flag, and she's holding a bit of discarded rubber, the marbles they call it, off a tyre. You could not look any more happy. There is a beaming grin on your face, or any more F1-y. Tell us what the atmosphere is like.
The atmosphere is crazy. I couldn't believe it.
The atmosphere is so good that I don't know how much of you we can hear, Rach. So I tell you what, Rach, we'll talk about the Grand Prix for a bit and do a bit of debriefing. You go get yourself to somewhere a little quieter and we'll check in with you at the end of the podcast. That sound good?
Okay.
Bless her. She looks like she's having the time of her life. I've never seen someone wearing so much merch.
Yeah, she looks proper Ferrari fan red because she's a big Carlos Sainz fan, which we'll talk to Rach a bit more about when we can actually hear her, when she's not in the chaos of a post Grand Prix. But she looks like she's having the best time.
Yeah, she really does. Should we talk about it then? Because, you know, I am in the early hours of the morning, Christian. It's my bedtime.
Well, it's your bedtime and you've been busy this evening, haven't you?
Just went out for dinner.
And?
Why are you trying to out me on this podcast?
She's had half a bottle of wine and she's still podcasting, so we could get anything from Betty Glover this evening. Could have anything from her.
This could go in any direction, to be honest, couldn't it?
But hang on, Betty, hang on. You've worked so hard. You deserve that wine. That is not me taking the mick. You fully well deserved on this trip of yours. So good for you. Anyway, carry on.
I will only drink when I get your permission that I am allowed.
Yes, as is the right way to do it. Absolutely.
Right. So we had another win for Max. Lando came second and Hamilton got his first podium of the season, coming third. I must say, I absolutely loved the crowd's reaction when Hamilton went up onto the podium. Incredible to see him up there, because we haven't seen him on the podium for a very long time, have we?
No, and it was lovely to see him back. He's one of the F1 all-time greats. It was fantastic to see Lewis back, and it's just nice to see Lewis having a nice time and a smile on his face. I watched his post-race interview with David Coulthard, and big beaming grin. Lovely to hear a nostalgic "Get in there, Lewis" from Bono. Really strong drive from him. He's looked right up there on George's pace all weekend, which has been not guaranteed this weekend. And even though George got a phenomenal start, which we'll talk about in a bit, Lewis and his side of the garage's strategy in ending the race on the soft tyres was the right way to go. And that's ultimately what enabled Lewis to get back on the podium today.
And also, I noticed afterwards, you know, when they go into the little room and they have their little, podcast chat,
The cool-down room.
call it. The cool-down room. I love that Lewis just kept saying to Lando and Max, he was like, oh, if I just had a better start, I would have been up there with you guys. Like, he repeated it 3 times.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Betty, because it shows us how much Mercedes have taken a step forward again, to the extent that, all right, they are clearly not quite at McLaren and Red Bull level, and we'll talk about their pace in a bit. But they're not far behind. And what George and Lewis are showing us recently is that they're well up there with chances of fighting for poles, in George's case, for top threes, for podiums. So, yeah, really good weekend for Mercedes. Well done to them.
We mentioned the start there a little bit because I said about Lewis mentioning the start. Shall we talk about it? Because George had a brilliant start and Lando not so much. Can you just sort of explain what went wrong for Lando?
Yeah, very simply. He didn't get off the line as well as Max Verstappen. And how many times last season on this podcast did I talk about we shouldn't take Max's wins for granted, the fact that he achieves perfection all the time. And this year, despite the fact this car is so much less dominant, the pack has closed up massively. We are not in a Red Bull domination era anymore. Still, Max Verstappen is winning plenty of Grand Prix. You have got to be perfect to beat Max Verstappen. Even, McLaren might have just had the edge on pace today. Lando still didn't win. And that is simply because, and he said it himself on the radio, in his post-race interview, he was gutted because he knows if he did even as good a job as Max at getting off the line, he'd have won that race. Now listen, Max has been in Formula One longer. We've seen Max mature as a driver. This is a driver in Max Verstappen that used to make too many mistakes, that used to get fiery too much. He now looks the complete racing driver, but this is only a relatively recent thing in terms of the sort of wider years of Max Verstappen in the sport. So Lando shouldn't be too hard on himself. I do think Lando's got everything in his locker to be a great like Max is, but we just saw today Max got off the line better. That first phase of the start was better. It was all about Max getting ahead of Lando, and that's exactly what he did.
Yeah, Max just executed it so well, didn't he? He was perfect. Rach, I don't know if you can hear us. If she's still listening, we can see her. What was it like in the stands during that moment at the start of the race? What was everyone's reaction around you?
Everyone was a bit shocked, to be honest. I don't think they were expecting Lando to drop many places as he did.
Were you a bit gutted to see that? What was your reaction?
Yeah, I was really gutted. Lando's like my number 2 driver. I'd say I'm probably like 51% Carlos, 49% Lando. So I was all gutted when it happened.
It looks like, Rach, you've moved to a bit of a quieter part of the complex. And as we said at the start, you are decked head to toe in Ferrari gear. We know you're a Carlos fan. Sounds to me like you're Welsh, Rach. Am I right? So what is it that unless you're half Spanish, what is it that makes you such a Carlos fan?
It was the first race I watched was I watched properly live on TV was Silverstone 22, and then when Carlos won, I thought, I like him.
I like him. I like what he's about. I like what he's done. And he's dropped down now in the rankings, hasn't he? Because Lando Norris has taken over. Yeah. How do you feel about that?
Really happy for Lando. I got to Carlos. I really thought he was gonna have a better season. The way he started off, don't really know what's going on with Ferrari at the moment.
Just in case you didn't catch what Rach was saying there, because it is very loud, Rach was asking, but basically what's going on with Ferrari, because obviously we saw them doing really well and it looked like they were properly catching Red Bull and McLaren. Obviously Charles won in Monaco, and then Canada and Spain have been a bit more disappointing from them. Well, to answer your question, Rach, I certainly think Ferrari have been hit by Mercedes really doing well with their upgrades, and I think that has sort of taken a little bit of the shine off Ferraris. I think what we're seeing with Ferrari at the moment is they've got a car that works very, very well on tighter circuits, on street circuits, on more traditional circuits. So we are talking Spain, we are talking Austria, we are talking Silverstone. I don't think the Ferrari works as well there, so they need to go back to the drawing board. We've seen how much it can change this year. I was sort of very sceptical that Mercedes could make a big step forward, and they have. So all is not lost for Ferrari. They just need to get back to the drawing board and get some upgrades in. And Spanish Grand Prix is a very good way of testing your car's all-round pace. What we're seeing at the moment is there is almost nothing in it between Red Bull and McLaren, and then we're in a situation where with Mercedes and Ferrari, I think it's going to be quite circuit specific. Mercedes had the edge this weekend. Might not be the case at all circuits, but it's certainly Mercedes and Ferrari are looking at getting up with Red Bull and McLaren.
Before we let you go, Rach, because there is so much going on around you, and I'm sure you just want to dive into Barcelona and go and do a little bit of exploring. What were your absolute highlights of the weekend?
I did a track walk on Thursday, which was amazing. I got really close to Carlos, and then just the stands, really. I couldn't believe how good the stand was and the view from there. It doesn't seem real. I feel like I'm standing on the side of just like a normal road at the moment, because it's such a strange thing to be stood on, and try to picture the cars going up and down it like 30 minutes ago. So yeah, I think that's the best part.
Rach, didn't you have a bit of a meeting with a certain famous British driver at one stage this weekend?
Oh, yeah, I did actually. Yeah, I forget to tell you what I met Lewis Hamilton on Friday.
I mean, that's worth mentioning.
Lewis and Hamilton, as I like to call him. Yeah, I had a photo with the elusive Lewis Hamilton look away.
He looks so identical to Lewis. I actually couldn't believe it. Like, because I've seen a picture of you with this, with his lookalike, and I was like, oh my God. I had to like double take.
I saw him Thursday in the centre of Barcelona. They brought some of the cars to the street, and I saw him there, and I did a double take, and I just thought, no, why on earth would Lewis be here in the middle of the Barcelona street? And then I saw him at the fan zone, and then Lewis saw him at the fan zone, and he was on the TV. And then I just looked behind me randomly in the Carlos grandstand, and he's just sat 8 rows behind me. So I just thought, right, I've seen him 3 times now. I'm going to go get a picture, and then I've got to.
Good. I would definitely get a picture. Right, Rach, we're going to let you go now so you can go exploring and enjoy the rest of your day.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks, Rach.
Thanks, both. Take care. Bye.
Bye.
Oh, she looked like a very, very happy person, didn't she? Despite Ferrari not making it onto the podium, she looked delighted.
She had a lovely weekend, I think, and yeah, looked properly embroiled in the world of Formula One with her merch on, walking on the track. It looked fantastic.
Right. What I wanted to talk to you about was little old Lando Norris, because I feel like we haven't really touched on him that much at the beginning of the podcast. I think it's so interesting how harsh he is on himself. Like, he came second, and I know he had his poor start or whatever, but don't you just think that there's just this switch in mentality with McLaren and Lando recently where coming second and third just isn't good enough anymore? They don't even want to celebrate the seconds and the thirds. They want to win.
You're spot on, Betty. Corinne Chandok raised a really, really good point in Sky's commentary when he said it's actually good to see, because last year, Lando was celebrating several second places because they knew they didn't have a car capable of getting first. So you think, great, yeah, we will celebrate. Of course we'll celebrate, because Lando even said that on a couple of occasions. Anytime I'm second behind Max, it's effectively a win. That's not the case now, because this weekend, I think at the very least that car was level pegging with Red Bull. And all Lando did wrong today, all weekend in fact, because he aced qualifying. He had a fantastic race, bar the first corner. It was literally get off the line and the first corner. Aside from that, Lando had the perfect weekend. And when you're up against somebody as damn good as Max Verstappen, that is all they need. And that's why Max got 25 points today and Lando didn't get the 25 points.
Do you think that McLaren potentially have the fastest car now?
I think it's impossible to say because it's so close, and it also depends on the driver in it. I'm still reluctant, and I think there are other people who disagree with me here. There are people who are saying that McLaren was faster this weekend. I still think it's damn close between the two of them, because we don't know what alternative strategy Red Bull might have done had Lando got off the line and held the lead into turn 1. So I think there's a lot of ifs, buts and maybes. I think at the very least those two are level pegging at the moment. In the hands of Max and in the hands of Lando, those two cars are so close, it comes down to the driver. And today, Max did the better job, and that's why he won the race.
It's amazing to think, because at the beginning of the season, we were very much like, oh, well, we just know how it's going to go, don't we? Red Bull are going to dominate. Max Verstappen's going to dominate. But now we're going into Austria and Silverstone, and we genuinely don't know who is going to win. Like, it is all to play for. And it's actually amazing how quickly McLaren have caught up with Red Bull, or how quickly Red Bull have dropped down.
I think we're going to have some tracks like Singapore where McLaren are clearly the fastest car. And then I think we're going to have tracks like Austria and Silverstone, the next two, where I think it's going to be super close between the two. If we get some upgrades from Ferrari, I don't think it's beyond the realms of possibility they could put themselves back in with a shout. I think at the tighter tracks, the street circuits, they'll be right back in it anyway. I think we are going to have a fantastic end to the season. And listen, that gap, Max is on 219 points, Lando is on 150, and I think we'll have to see a couple of Australia-style reliability issues for Max if Lando's going to be let back into the Drivers' Championship, because actually, if Lando picks up 3 or 4 more wins, so long as Max is in second, he can live with that. That's okay. Where I think we're in really interesting territory is the Constructors' Championship, because it's a 60-point gap between Red Bull and Ferrari at the moment. I am expecting, then McLaren are further down on 237 compared to Ferrari's 270. I am expecting McLaren to close that gap to Ferrari. I think that's really interesting because, again, today we've had Sergio Perez come, where did Sergio finish in the end? 8th. I think the constructors is interested, I really do, considering you've got, obviously 2 drivers worth of points per race. Gaps can close quicker. So whatever happens, we're going to see a lot of exciting racing between now and the end of the year.
Well, on that point, young Christian, we had a question from David. He says, can Red Bull afford to stick with Perez? Yes, new contract inked, but at what cost is this coming? Because Max can be champion this and next year, but constructors, they could drop down, couldn't they?
I think, yes, they probably can afford Checo in this form this season because they've got that advantage that they built from the start. At the moment, the pack's closed up. 2025 is a continuation of this. So next year, they might not be able to. And as I've just said, that constructors' battle is on. So I think they'll probably be okay. But Sergio, I don't know, it's 2 years in a row after Miami. It's like after the first 5 or so Grand Prix, it just falls off.
It's such a shame, isn't it? Because we spoke to him obviously at the start of the season, before the season got started. And we had a really nice chat with him, didn't we? And we were like, oh, come on, just do it. Just have a really good season. And he started off really well once again. And we were like, yeah, come on. Like, you're going to do this. You're going to be great. And he's just fallen off a cliff.
He's a great guy. And you don't hear anyone talking badly. I'll tell you what, I'm just going to have to get the door. Just stay there.
No, we're going to keep this in. He's wearing little shorts as he runs to his front door.
I'll pick up.
Why do your shorts have 52 on them, Christian? Is that your race number? Your race to the front door.
Yeah, I have no idea why there's 52 on the shorts. What I can tell you is I rushed off to answer the door, which my flatmate Chris kindly got. And these shorts, I believe, were about £3 from Asda when I was at uni. Before I went to answer the door.
Fascinating.
Truly insightful, isn't it? Moving on to, Sergio Perez. You don't hear anyone talk badly about him in the paddock. Do you remember when we had Bernie Collins on and how warmly Bernie spoke about him? He's a great guy and he's one of those that's everyone wills him to do well. But you just wish there's that bit more from Checo because we've seen what he is capable of. Look at the first handful of races of this season where he was right up there. The first handful of races last year where he won 2 Grand Prix. He's won some impressive Grand Prix this time, Sergio Perez. And it was just another one this weekend where he's just nowhere near all weekend. And there will come a time in this rule set where, to answer David's question, it's going to be like, this is tricky. Because if at the moment, Checo's got like half the points of Max. It's too big a gap.
Shall we talk about Alpine then? Because they had a little bit of an interesting weekend on and off the track. Both Alpines into Q3. What's changed?
I don't know what's changed, actually. And I think they were a little bit pleasantly surprised to get both cars into Q3. They've just made very solid gains over the course of the season, where if you look at pre-season testing and the early races of the season, they were the slowest car. You want more from them. This is a team that's won world championships, but let's give them their credits, because what we've seen from this year is they are improving the car. The upgrades are getting there. And now, unlike at the start of the year, these upgrades mean that we're heading into qualifying thinking it is possible for an Alpine to get into Q3, and they are well in the fight to get out of Q1 and into Q2, whereas before we were saying, God, they're doing well to even get into Q2. So credit to the team there.
Rachel actually had this question before we let her go, so I'm going to ask it on her behalf. She said, I've read up on it briefly, but it's before my time as a fan. What is the controversy around Flavio Briatore returning to Formula One? Does it go deeper than the 2008 Crashgate? And what do you think this will mean for the future of Alpine?
So,
good question.
It's a great question. If you've missed this weekend we saw Alpine announce that a man called Flavio Briatore is coming back into the sport and back to the team as an advisor. When I was growing up watching F1, Flavio was a Toto Wolff figure, big name around the paddock. He was the old boss of the Renault team. He was very closely connected to Fernando Alonso's career. He was there when they won their World Championships. Big name of the sort of 2000s era of Formula One. In 2008 at the Singapore Grand Prix, it's well worth reading up on this if you don't know about it. Renault, their number 2 driver, Nelson Piquet Jr., who was racing in the team with Fernando Alonso at the time, deliberately crashed on the 15th lap of the Singapore Grand Prix, and it caused a safety car. Now, Fernando Alonso had started 15th in that race, but was running a strategy that meant he was massively helped out by a safety car. Betty, how often do we see that in Formula One? A safety car coming out at the right time, and it helps. What you can't do is tell your driver to crash deliberately in order to bring out a safety car. That is risking a driver's life. That is absolutely out the question. After a lengthy investigation, the FIA said that Renault were guilty of race fixing. And Flavio Briatore and the Executive Director of Engineering, Pat Simmons, they were both given bans, and Flavio Briatore was given a lifetime ban from Formula One. Now, he successfully appealed that lifetime ban a couple of years later and has been able to, by the rules, return to the sport for a long, long time, but never has. And he's older now, and it was kind of thought that he was a name from the past. So it's controversial because of that. It's also controversial because this is a guy that's been out of the front line of F1 for more than a decade. And there is no guarantee, as you know, Betty, in top-level sport, if you've been out of the picture, if you brought Sir Alex Ferguson back out of retirement now, after 10 years away from Manchester United, there's no guarantee that he'd be a fantastic appointment there. So that's what's controversial.
It would work.
No. That said, listen, for all his controversies, Flavio Briatore is an unbelievably bright man who knows Formula One, and the fact that he the incident that led to his departure from Formula One being so controversial, that's why people have been talking about it so much.
Something that we haven't actually spoken about, Christian, which to be fair, I really think we do need to speak about, is Aston Martin. I mean, what is going on? They're not at the game, are they? They're not at the races. As you'd say in horse racing.
Can we tell it's late night for Betty? As she'd say in horse racing, as Betty goes slowly mad on half a bottle of wine in the middle of the night. That's part of the reason why Alpine are able to get double points, because Aston have dropped off. And what we've seen is them roar out the blocks last season after a brilliant winter. You've got Fernando up there fighting for podiums, and then really, ever since then, a sort of bit of a slow decline as everyone else in this rule set has been able to develop their cars faster than they have. Neither driver in the points this weekend, and it's not like you could criticise Fernando or Lance, really. They've not had a car quick enough, because let's be honest, especially in Fernando's case, if that car's quick enough, he's getting it in the points at his home Grand Prix. He's won that race before. So, concerning times for Mike Krack and his Aston Martin team, because, the owner is such an ambitious man. They're not in F1 to be a midfield team. They're in F1 to do what they were doing. They want to be up there right where the Ferraris and the Mercedes are, at the very least, pushing for podiums. So the fact that they have this weekend, because it was bad in Canada too, and the fact that this weekend they've not looked like getting points, there's going to be some head scratching going on at Silverstone. That's one to watch, that is.
Yeah, indeed. I spotted a story earlier that I think we can pin on our George Russell community notice board.
Oh, yeah.
So this happened in F2 this weekend. So basically, back in 2019, Juan Manuel Correa almost lost his foot and had to have his right leg completely rebuilt after being involved in an awful crash at Spa, which you remember really well, don't you, Christian?
The whole motorsport world remembers it, because it's, of course, the crash that cost Antoine Hubert his life. I remember... I was going through an airport security at the time, keeping tracks on the race on my phone, and it's so shocking when something like that happens in this level of motorsport. When you see a crash like that and you think, goodness me, that's scary. And one of the darkest days of motorsport in many, many years. This weekend, 5 years later to the day, Correa was back on the podium in third. An incredible story that he has been able to not just get back to racing anything, because he was, as you just said, Betty, his leg was almost completely rebuilt. The fact he's got back to racing is astonishing. So to get back on the podium at the top level of Formula 2 after what he's been through, that is amazing. We should always remember how heroic these people are who risk their lives for racing, and the sheer significance of what they do. And we're watching racing week in, week out. So it's lovely to remember those we've lost and remember the achievements and for Carrera to get back on the podium this weekend. Phenomenal little moment. And you could hear the emotion in Alex Jakes' voice. By the way, if you wanted a little sort of look through the F2 season so far, me and Alex Jakes did that on the preview episode, and it's well worth listening back to if you missed it, because there's plenty in there. But you could hear the emotion in Alex's voice as he crossed the line. A really nice moment of the weekend this weekend.
Okay, well, to end on a little bit more of a high, we're going to be back later this week with Greg as well, as we start to build up to your trip to Silverstone, which I am not going to be there for, which I am absolutely gutted about. But you guys are going to have an unbelievable time.
What we are going to try our very best to do on the Fast and the Curious as we go into Silverstone is bring you into it, our listeners, as much as we possibly can. So we'll be back later this week with details about what we're going to be doing, where you can find us, what's going to be happening if you're not at Silverstone. Because actually, Betty, Silverstone, I remember this because I only went a few times as a kid because we couldn't afford it. And I found it sometimes really difficult, the British Grand Prix weekend. So, we will bring the British Grand Prix to you. Even you, Betty, as far away as Australia.
I know, I'm going to listen to the Fast and Curious as a fan over Silverstone weekend, and I'm really excited. But yeah, this week, we're back with Greg. You're going to hear us recording a really fun little thing for the British Grand Prix, which I think went pretty well. And you're also going to hear me and Christian having a really lovely chat with Jamie Chadwick. So,
Jamie's on as well, isn't she? Yes, we've already done that with that chat, haven't we? That was brilliant. Jamie's fantastic. So yeah, that's really worth listening. We love Jamie.
She was on great form. On that note, shall we wrap it up? Because it is 1:52 in the morning for me, so I feel like.
But you're working nights, aren't you? So this is normal for you at the moment.
I've gone nocturnal. I'm like an owl.
I'm working late because I'm presenting Australian coverage of the European Championship.
I feel like this is probably the right moment to end this podcast.
Yeah, it probably is, isn't it? Yeah, that was. And on that low point, we say goodbye.
Bye.